Hi folks, Lou here, and I'm going to talk about alliance abandonment. And this isn't game design specifically, but it relates to it. Now, what is alliance abandonment? It's when two countries have an alliance, but when push comes to shove, one of the countries does not follow through. For example, uh, Greece was allied to help Serbia at the beginning of World War I, and that was a leftover from the Balkan Wars, which had happened just a few years before. Greece didn't help Serbia in 1914 and waited until 1915 when it was more or less too late. One statistic I see is that nations follow through on alliance abandonment or alliance commitments only 75% of the time. Um, and I don't know how accurate that is, but I'm sure there are many other occasions when it didn't happen. For example, Italy was allied to the Central Powers in World War I, though that was a defensive alliance, but in the end they came in on the Allied side. You can also think of the Sitzkrieg or Phony War, which occurred after the start of World War II. The British and French didn't really do enough to say so to try to help Poland, and the Polish fell to the Germans and the Soviets. Well, let's look at more modern period. NATO has solutions for this alliance abandonment. And that one of those solutions is to station another nation's units in country. So there are American troops in Poland, for example. And if the Russians are foolish enough to invade Poland, then probably Americans would get killed, and it would make a much bigger difference to what happens. Now, let me back off a minute here before I talk more about solutions. Think about the game diplomacy. If you've ever played diplomacy, you know that alliances may last a long time or they may last no time, in effect, or they may last only a short time. But diplomacy is not realistic in the sense that a nation state has much more difficulty changing its alliance structure than a person playing a game. A person playing the game can decide at any point, well, I'm going to backstab this guy, or I'm going to attack this guy before he attacks me, and so on. That's difficult to do for nation states. If a nation's been allied with somebody for a long time, the people of the nation are going to think of those other people as friends. And it's going to be difficult for the government to turn them against them. It can happen, but it's going to be difficult. But in games, it can happen at the drop of a hat. Now, what other solutions has NATO found to alliance abandonment? Well, integration, in other words, all the nations using the same weapons, for example, the 155 millimeter standard artillery shell that NATO uses. But also they train together. Some nations specialize in certain kinds of things while others do not, because that's more efficient than every nation trying to do everything. Economic interdependence is another. And of course, with NATO, that's relatively simple because Western Europe is economically interdependent and Europe is interdependent with the United States and vice versa. So you can have long-term reciprocation and you can have specialization between the nations, and that makes it even more difficult for them to abandon an alliance. Now, we do see holdouts, nations that don't stick with it. In this case, Hungary and Turkey are the ones I'm thinking of in modern NATO. But there have been times when France didn't seem to be sticking with it. And of course, the economic interdependence can be reduced. The United Kingdom went through Brexit and withdrew from the European Union, so that presumably reduced their economic interdependence with the rest of Europe, but they're still stalwarts in NATO. So this can affect negotiation and the inertia of nation states to hold certain alliances can also affect how you design a game. Thanks for listening.